They told you women were angels, but have you ever questioned why you were taught that? Behind the polished smiles, the romanticized myths, and the sacred pedestal lies a forbidden manuscript, a vision so raw, so merciless, that it was buried. For over a century, Schopenhauer didn't write it for approval. He wrote it to wound illusions. This is not about misogyny. This is about unmasking the persona, the psychological costume society forces us to wear. And no mask is more sacrosanct, more defended, than the illusion of idealized femininity. What if the feminine archetype you worship is not light, but shadow? Jung warned us. The unconscious doesn't care about your fantasies. It reflects back your suppressed truths, and the feminine, as an archetype, holds both nurturing and destruction, life and devouring chaos. Schopenhauer saw through it. He saw the instincts, raw, pre-verbal, animalistic, that governed both sexes but were far more forbidden in women. Why? Because society depends on the illusion of female moral superiority. To maintain it, truth must be exiled. But the shadow doesn't stay buried. It festers. Look deeper. When a woman withholds affection, when she manipulates through silence, when she weaves emotional dependency, is that love? Or is it an unconscious survival instinct? The same instinct Schopenhauer called the will to life, manifesting not in poetry, but in strategy. What we call female innocence might just be socially sanctioned psychological warfare, cloaked in grace, driven by necessity. You don't have to agree, but you should at least see. Because once you see, you can't unsee, and the mask begins to crack. In every civilization, the strongest control is the one you can't name. And that's precisely where feminine power hides, not in force, but in absence of force, in silence, in softness, in the carefully cultivated appearance of submission. Schopenhauer recognized what modern psychology still tiptoes around, that power does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers, and when it does, it controls without consequence. You've been trained to fear male aggression, to label it, track it, condemn it. But what of the invisible manipulation that flows beneath the surface of politeness, kindness, and maternal sweetness? What of the tears that appear exactly when needed, the passivity that provokes, the helplessness that demands rescue? Jung would call this the anima, the unconscious feminine image within the male psyche, a force of seduction and inspiration, but also deception. When this archetype is not integrated, it takes over, it puppeteers desire, it binds men to illusions, and illusions are profitable. A woman does not need to dominate a man's body. She need only haunt his mind, as ideal, as rejection, as the ghost of the mother he could never please. This is not hatred. This is not blame. This is shadow work. The persona tells you women are victims. The shadow knows they are also predators, not by malice, but by design. Emotional predators, often unaware of the game they're playing, driven by instincts more ancient than memory. Schopenhauer saw it. He wrote of it. And for that they tried to erase him. But the truth never dies. It waits, beneath your comfort, beneath your fantasies, beneath her smile. You want to be free? Then stop falling for the performance. You were told that women give life, but no one told you they own it. Beneath every society, beneath every ritual, beneath every law, there is one unspoken truth. Reproduction is power. Not symbolic, not poetic, biological, absolute. Schopenhauer didn't romanticize the womb. He exposed it. He saw how nature had wired both sexes to serve one goal, the continuation of the species. But only one sex was given the throne of selection, the female. She does not pursue. She is pursued. She does not offer herself. She chooses. And in that choice, entire bloodlines are born or erased. Do you understand what that means? Every act of seduction, every display of strength, every sacrifice men make, at its root, is a plea to be chosen. a hunger for validation not from society, but from the gatekeeper of life itself. Jung knew this instinct. He saw it hidden, in myth, in the sirens, the goddesses, the devouring mothers. The female archetype isn't just nurturing. It is sovereign. It holds power over existence itself, and when corrupted, over identity, worth, and legacy. Modern culture tells men to respect women, but what it often means is submit to the archetype, worship the feminine not as it is, but as it should be, and in doing so, you don't love her, you abandon yourself. The persona tells you she's innocent, but deep in the shadow, she is not only life-giver, she is also the judge, the one who says you are worthy to exist or not. This isn't about blaming women. It's about exposing the spell, the ancient biological contract that governs us while pretending not to exist. And once you see the contract, you can decide whether to keep signing it. Equality. The word tastes noble, just, righteous. But what if it's a myth? Not because one sex is greater or lesser, but because they are not playing the same game. Schopenhauer saw this long before modern ideologies blurred the lines. He didn't speak in euphemisms. He didn't pretend balance existed where biology dictated otherwise. To him, nature was not fair. It was strategic. And in that strategy, man and woman were given opposing weapons. Men were given strength, expendability, ambition, tools for conquest, for sacrifice. Women were given selectivity, concealment, emotional intelligence, tools for preservation, for control through influence. Different roles, different instincts, not equal. Complementary in design, but unequal in consequence. Modern narratives would have you believe in symmetry, that everything is interchangeable. But ask yourself, if that were true, why are men still the ones dying in wars, working the most dangerous jobs, and judged by how much they produce, while women are judged by how much they are desired? Is that equality? Or is that a masquerade? Jung would call this the trap of the persona, the societal mask that demands men act as protectors, while pretending protection is no longer needed. It's not real progress. It's emotional extortion wrapped in ideology. The shadow knows better. It whispers, "You are not equal. You are being used. Used by instincts older than civilization. Used by systems that claim liberation while enforcing ancient biological hierarchies in disguise." Schopenhauer wasn't bitter. He was awake. He saw that pretending equality exists where nature has not allowed it is not justice. It is delusion, and delusion breeds suffering. Because when you deny the truth of difference, you blind yourself to the truth of power. Every man is haunted by his first woman, and it wasn't his lover. It was his mother. Schopenhauer described the maternal bond not as holy, but as binding, a primal contract of dependence, fear, and unspoken control. To be born is to be indebted. To be mothered is to be imprinted. And what begins in warmth often ends in obedience masked as love. Jung called it the mother archetype. Vast, devouring, life-giving yet suffocating. The nurturing goddess and the engulfing abyss. Most men never realize they are not loving women. They are reenacting the emotional script written by the mother who held them first and let them go last. Think, how many of your relationships were really about her? The approval you craved, the rejection you feared, the invisible rules you followed to stay good. You weren't choosing women. You were choosing versions of her. Versions that kept you small, obedient, and dependent on the feminine for your worth. This is the mother wound. A psychological scar that says, you are only lovable if you serve, if you please, if you never threaten her control. And society rewards this wound. It calls it being a nice guy, a gentleman, a real man. But behind those titles lies a castration of will, of rage, of individuality. Schopenhauer saw it for what it was, a prison dressed in comfort. To heal is not to hate the mother. It is to separate from her spell, to see her not as goddess, not as villain, but as the human source of a program that no longer serves you. Because if you don't confront the mother within, you'll forever search for her in the women you. Then they will sense it, and they will use it, not consciously but instinctively, because wounded men are easy to manipulate. Rejection. It doesn't just hurt, it redefines you. Schopenhauer believed that suffering is the essence of existence. But what he didn't say, and what Jung implied, is that the sharpest suffering comes not from war or poverty, but from the loss of perceived value in another's eyes, especially hers. When a woman rejects you, she does not simply walk away. She withdraws confirmation of your existence. Suddenly, you are not worthy, not enough, not seen. And the man, who was once whole, collapses into fragments, questioning every part of himself that was once certain. But here's the hidden truth. Her rejection is currency. It buys her power. It exerts control. It forces you into reflection, desperation, even obsession. The more you cared, the more she owns the narrative of who you are. This isn't about cruelty. It's about instinct. Nature made her selective, cautious, calculating. Her survival once depended on rejecting the unworthy. But in modern times, this biological program has mutated into something else, a game of psychological leverage, where your reaction becomes her mirror of worth. And men, especially unintegrated men, fall for it. You chase her not because she's divine, but because she denied you. Jung would say your shadow is screaming, the part of you that tied your value to being chosen. The part that never separated love from validation. The boy within, still hoping for approval from the goddess mother you projected onto her face. But there's something worse than rejection. Needing it. Because when rejection becomes the only thing that proves you felt something real, you are not in love, you are in bondage. Schopenhauer warned that love is often just a trick played by the will, a trap to perpetuate the species. But what if rejection is the other half of that? Trick eats the hook that ensures you never stop chasing. Rejection doesn't break you. It reveals how deeply you were already fractured. You never really saw her. You saw yourself, reflected, distorted, magnified. Schopenhauer understood that desire isn't about the object. It's about what the object reflects back to you. And nowhere is that more insidious than in the way men idealize women. Not as people, but as mirrors. She smiles and you feel worthy. She withdraws and you feel invisible. She is not a muse. She is a canvas, painted by your needs, fears, and unprocessed trauma. And the tragedy? She often doesn't even know the role you've assigned her. Jung called this projection, when unconscious content is cast onto another. The anima, specifically, is the inner feminine that every man carries. Seductive, inspiring, chaotic. If unintegrated, it possesses you. You fall in love with your own projection, and then resent her for not living up to it. And she never can, because she was never the dream. She was just the screen it played on. This is how men become trapped. Not by women, but by the illusion of what women mean to them. She becomes validation, salvation, identity. But these are burdens no person can carry, and when she fails, you rage, retreat, or spiral. But what if the collapse wasn't failure? What if it was liberation? To see the feminine not as goddess or demon, but as human, flawed, instinctual, reactive, is to finally break the enchantment. And in that moment, you don't stop loving women. You stop needing them to complete your sense of self. Schopenhauer would say that to cease desiring is to begin waking up. Jung would say to reclaim your projection is to begin individuation, the process of becoming whole. Because when the mirror shatters, you finally see who's been missing all along. You. What's more dangerous than malice? Innocence. Not true. Innocence. But the appearance of it. The carefully curated softness. The subtle fragility, the strategically timed helplessness that disarms you before you realize you've surrendered. Schopenhauer saw this long before the term toxic was ever attached to behavior. He observed how the feminine could weaponize passivity, not through force but through expectation, through social scripts that punish male assertion while sanctifying female vulnerability. She doesn't need to raise her voice. She only needs to look disappointed, and just like that, you fold. But ask yourself, where did this begin? With culture? With biology? With the ancient myth that woman is morally superior? The gentle soul balancing man's violence? Or was that myth designed to conceal something deeper? Something Jung explored through the archetype of the devouring mother, the feminine force that nurtures only to consume, that binds with care, that controls with love. Modern society thrives on this imbalance. It tells men they must earn their worth, prove their strength, apologize for their needs, while encouraging women to believe their value is innate, unquestionable, untouchable. That's not equality. That's psychological warfare. Because if she's always innocent, you're always guilty, and guilt is the leash. Men raised under the shadow of this archetype don't grow into kings. They grow into servants, always apologizing, always self-editing, always chasing the smile that tells them they've been good. Schopenhauer refused to play this game. He saw through the aesthetic, the manipulative power cloaked in virtue. He was hated for it, mocked, censored, but he chose truth over comfort. So must you, because when innocence is used as a shield for control, it becomes the most insidious form of domination. And the cost of obedience is yourself. You were not born submissive. You were trained from childhood through culture, school, family. Every system whispered the same command. Do not upset the feminine, serve it, protect it, worship it. And when you obeyed, you were rewarded, not with freedom but with acceptance. But what does a man become when his worth is measured by how well he avoids conflict with women? He becomes hollow. Schopenhauer warned that man's suffering is not only from what he endures, but from what he is forced to endure in silence. And modern masculinity is built on silent endurance, emotional censorship, suppressed resentment, self-abandonment for female approval. This is not strength. This is slavery. Jung might say it's the shadow of the hero archetype, the man who slays dragons for love, but never realizes he is the dragon being slain. You are told to lead, yet punished for authority. Told to express, yet shamed for pain. Told to love, yet stripped of the right to question the terms of that love. And so you bend. You bend to the emotional economy she manages. You bend to the persona, the mask you crafted to be accepted, to be desirable, to be safe. But the shadow watches, the part of you that wants to rise, to say no, to reclaim the throne of your own instincts. And every time you silence him, you lose power. Because the truth is, you were never meant to submit. You were meant to integrate, to confront the feminine, not fear it. To see the woman not as goddess or enemy, but as equal in shadow, capable of both light and manipulation. Schopenhauer saw a world where men lived in chains forged from their own longing. Not physical chains, psychological ones. You wear those chains every time you censor your truth to keep her comfortable. And every time you do, you disappear. You don't need her to free you. You need to free yourself from her. Not the woman, but the image of her that you've carried like a sacred wound. Schopenhauer wrote as if the world were a prison of illusions, desire, morality, beauty, all constructs, all veils. But he didn't stop there. He believed that suffering wasn't a flaw in the system. It was the system. To awaken is not to feel better, it is to see without distortion. And when it comes to women, to the feminine, nothing is more distorted than your fantasy. You thought she would complete you. You thought she was the light to your darkness. You were wrong. She is not your salvation. She is your mirror, your test, your undoing. And through her rejection, her seduction, her silence, you are invited to meet the parts of yourself you've never faced. Jung's process of individuation demands it. Confrontation with the shadow, integration of the unconscious, the slaying of the persona, not just intellectually, emotionally, viscerally, symbolically. You must kill the boy who needed to be chosen. Only then can the man emerge, whole, sovereign, unchained. Society will call this toxic. Women may call it selfish. But they are not your judges. Not anymore. Your worth is no longer outsourced to their gaze, their approval, their comfort. You are no longer a servant of the archetype. You are a man who has stared into the myth and walked out the other side. This is liberation. Not peace, not pleasure, but truth. And truth once seen cannot be unseen.